realize very quickly that the first ingredient in that is the people. And if the people are wrong, you
Yep.
can put any kind of fancy process or whatever on top of it, and it's still not going to work. Recruiting is like sales, but it's like really honest sales if it's done right. Like I'm not trying to sell you a product that doesn't exist. I actually liked what I learned about myself on the other side of being pushed a
Yep.
little bit.
Yep.
And most people are okay being pushed as long as it's also balanced with you being a human. The worst thing in the world, the thing that would be the least motivating for me in the entire world is somebody who didn't have high expectations for me. Don't underestimate what people are capable of, particularly if you have high standards for yourself.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. I have the honor to have Alli Trussell on my Leaders in Talent podcast. Alli is currently the SVP at Bilt Rewards, but as a former actor and theater company leader, Alli's unconventional path has shaped her approach into building high-performance teams. Before Bilt, Alli scaled operations at Wunderkind from 700 first down to 500, up again to over 1,200 employees when Alli left. Alli, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I know things are pretty busy and crazy at Bilt, so I'm really mindful and glad that you have 30 to 40 minutes to spare with me to share some of your learnings. When we started preparing for this podcast last week, there was a common theme that really stood out for me.
Mhm.
Because when we were talking through your career and the different roles you had, we kind of like came to the conclusion that you've been able to drive phenomenal results with a very small, lean team. So before we dive into like what does it mean and what your learnings there, can you share a little bit more with our audience, what your journey has been and how your, background in theater and as an actor has shaped your approach to hiring and scaling teams?
So many of us, we did not end up in the job that we went to college for. Crazy that we think at 17 people have exactly the idea of what they're going to do with the rest of their lives. I was like, I'm going to do plays. I'm going to be an actress. I can't decide what career I want, so I'm just going to, be an actor where I can like have every career for the duration of said play. And that
Yeah.
sounds really fun to me. But like most theater kids, I moved up to New York to do theater. And as part of that, I think at one point I had 8 jobs where I was, essentially trying to support my hobby.
Yeah.
One of those was actually running my own theater company. And my shtick is I always tell people that it's not that different from working in tech because you have like no budget, no time, massive personalities, and you're expected to make magic. And so,
Yeah.
in some ways it felt like a huge transition into the corporate world.
Are you facing market volatility, need to hire quickly, or have a team that sits idle? Meet Matcher, your flexible recruitment and sourcing partner. Scale your recruitment capacity up or down without compromising on quality. Trusted by Booking.com, Miro, Heineken, Grammarly, and Deal, Matcher is the RPO disruptor making waves in Europe and the US. For scale-ups and corporates, Matcher covers engineering, go-to-market, and G&A roles. Visit Matcher.io to see how we can support you. That's MATCHR.io.
And then others, I was like, kind of feel like I have a leg up here. It's like chaos is kind of what I'm used to. I would work 4 jobs in one day, running all around town. And so, having like 1 or 2 things to focus on actually felt really structured and nice, but landed in tech by accident, was working for a bunch of different people, one of whom was the CEO. And he ended up bringing me on to his company full time. I fought it. I was like, I never want a 9 to 5 job. I don't want to sit at a desk. I'm going to be so bored. He was like, not going to be 9 to 5. You don't have to have a desk if you don't want to. And I think
Yeah.
you'll be entertained for the people. And started on the operations side of the house. I like figuring out how to make things work. And I kind of like doing a little bit of everything myself, which I think bleeds into liking lean teams.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating to me because in trying to make everything work, you realize very quickly that the first ingredient in that is the people. And if the people are wrong,
Yeah.
you can put any kind of fancy process or whatever on top of it, and it's still not going to work. So I found myself like increasingly drawn to the people side of the house. And like the piece that actually felt the most natural was recruiting. And I knew nothing about recruiting. Like today, I'm still not a very technical recruiter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I'm not your girl, like looking all the way down LinkedIn, finding the perfect candidate. But in a way, like, as long as you're doing something with common sense, I think it's actually super helpful sometimes to not know the quote unquote right way to do something, which I certainly did not. And
Yeah.
I remember stumbling, it's funny, I saw this person last week. He's still a great friend of mine, but my first like step into recruiting was we were at a conference and I was watching this guy. He was the CMO of Boxed at the time.
Yeah.
He gave this phenomenal speech. Like I was moved to tears. I was just like, this guy must work with us. I am going to recruit this guy. I have still yet to actually close this man, so it's not a success story. It's relevant, I promise. He's incredible. And my CEO at the time was like, okay, figure out how to get him to work here.
Yeah.
And almost did, but I mean, like, I was doing crazy stuff. I like did a deep Twitter dive. I found out he liked yellow Laffy Taffies. Like when he came in, our office was like busting with yellow Laffy Taffies. Like I got a mural commissioned for him. I was just like, we will make this so customized to you
Yeah.
that you will
Yeah.
either think we are stalking you, which we kind of are, or
Yeah.
like I must come work for this
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
And like I said, he didn't, but we are still friends today, and I got
Yeah.
him for out of it.
Yeah.
But what I took from that is that, like, in the same way that I believe this in an approach to HR is like, yes, there is some level of structure and scale and where you can build feeder systems for other roles. That's amazing. There are these tricks, but most of it is just relating to people and making things customized and like making them have a point where they look back and they're like, I felt so special and so cared for and so wanted in this recruiting process. And that's a very human thing. And I
Yeah.
think in a lot of ways that tends to supersede comp and all of these other things that seem like the very obvious bullet points that people look for in a job. I've also
Yeah.
always worked places where like part of your identity was what you do, and that's a celebrated thing here. And I'm happy to
Mm,
talk more about that. But like, I think because I was just kind of like trying random things and I was throwing things at the wall, I appreciated people who thought outside of the box. And I think that is the number one requirement in running a lean team. You have to have people who enjoy going above and beyond and people who are like going to put a little faith in this chaos.
yeah.
And that's something that's definitely held true for me.
Tell me what happened at Wunderkind during COVID, because, as almost every single business in the world, you were impacted.
Yep.
You went through layoffs. You had to lay off almost your entire
Mhm.
recruitment team.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, 2 months later, rapid growth,
Yep.
companies returning to rapid growth.
Mhm.
He had to hire 80 open positions
Yep.
in a month, basically, with a super small team. Yes.
It seems like such a crazy thing to remember. I mean, like, look,
Yeah.
you hit the nail on the head. We were not immune to the panic of March of 2020, but like quick background,
Yeah.
this is a drastic oversimplification, but Wunderkind helped people take their brick and mortar stores and drive that same business online. So
Yeah.
once everything kind of calmed down and it wasn't, the sky was falling and we had a little bit more of a grasp on what was going on, our business was actually starting to help these businesses that were really suffering. So that's why we returned to growth. And by the early fall, we realized that we actually couldn't keep up with demand. And so we definitely did. First thing we did was go back to anybody we'd laid off
Yeah.
and tried to get them to come back. A lot of them did, but we still had about 80 open headcount. And I remember, and like props to them, and I don't mind calling them out, Lauren and Talia, like
Yeah.
part of it was just how incredible they were. But I remember going to them and like, it was basically like, who's going to run the talent team? And I think I could do it because I saw some things that were working and some things where we could improve. And I really thought both of them were incredible. So I was like, I'll dive in. This sounds fun. And I remember talking to both of them and I told them, I was like, this is going to be crazy. This is going to be really hard. But if we do this right, I actually think this is going to be one of those times that you look back on your career and you're like, holy, I did this. I think in times like that, your work really matters and it gets the spotlight and it gets that recognition and you understand exactly what you do on a day to day connects to the broader success of the company. And like, that is one of those times where I have felt that most, but like to their credit, they buckled down. We
Yeah.
were sending, once we got it spun up, we were sending 2 to 3 offers a day. Like by the end of it, I did go back and look. We'd hired like 60 people in a month. And
Wow. With
with
Two
two.
recruiters and you,
Two
basically.
people. I was helping them at the beginning. I was helping
Yeah.
them hop on the phone at the end with candidates, but they were really doing it. And like, it is just a testament to how much, and it's part of what drew me to Bilt, quite
Yeah.
honestly. It's really, really heavy on ownership, like what you can touch and what you can drive for the business. And when you have a big piece of it, I think you are inherently more motivated. And so like, it was astounding to me. And again, part of it is just they were ridiculously talented and very good at their jobs, because this would not have worked with two lesser recruiters.
Yep.
But you do see what people are capable of in high pressure moments. And I think,
Mm.
there's a whole thing with like, you shouldn't be stressed at work, and like, you should not be chronically stressed at work. But I think even for my own career, my best performance and like the times when I have grown most is when I've been under a lot of pressure and like had to deliver something. And I think that is inherently human. You don't want to let the team down,
Yeah.
And so it was an incredible performance, and we sustained it for quite a while, as you see to where we ended up later. Um, but yeah, I think it was just a buckling down. I'm not sure. I know you have a question in here about like what tactics, what'd you do? I think we just agreed to like all do our best. And it was that's wanting it and being motivated and being really connected and understanding what impact we could have. I think that's what drove it. And they were really talented.
But it's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone. No, it's not. So it has to be the right people. You know what I mean? I think that's the other piece
Yeah.
of having a lean team, right? Unfortunately, in a lean team, you can't have a weak link. And you do have, I think there's like two groups of people. And I talk about this a lot actually on interviews. I think, I'm a person who I think probably because I grew up in theater, what I do is part of who I am, right? Like, I like my job. I
Yeah.
like the portion of my day that is at my job. Do I every now and then get annoyed when my alarm clock goes off in the morning? Yes, but I love what I do.
Yeah.
And it is a part of my life. It is not something that I do in support of my real life. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and in lean teams, I think you have to have people in that former camp, because you all kind of have this like unwritten agreement that like you're gonna get it done. But I think the payoff on that your work matters, and like not even in some mission driven way, but just that your work matters for the other people at the company and the teammates that you really care about and the potential of the company. That has to be really exciting. You also have to be incredibly disciplined, and you have to be a little psychotic in how much you like to work at times. But I really think if you have the right people, if you have a high bar for talent and you're all in it together, it does work.
So were there during that pressure cooker, right? Next to like buckle up, like really hard work with people that are willing to do the grind, right? Were there any other things now looking back where you're like, oh, that's something that we did really well, or that's something maybe if you are in a similar position, you would have changed slightly?
Mm. Yes, probably would have changed a lot. I
Yeah.
honestly I don't know if I remember any specifics from that time period, to be quite
Yeah.
honest, because it was so much like we were sprinting on a hamster wheel. I have focused on more as I've gotten a little bit more settled in my career. I've had a little bit more of it under my belt, is
Yeah.
making sure that you don't sacrifice quality for speed. And I think there is, because you've seen the flip side of this, right? Like there was COVID, there was like the blow up of the market, and then everyone overhired, and then they had to shrink again.
Yeah.
And so I think there's this really tricky thing in recruiting, and it was definitely something that ebbed and flowed at Wunderkind. Was like, on one hand, you're incentivizing how many people can you close, and it's kind of like a sales job, and it's like, let's just get these people in, let's get them in fast, let's win on
Yeah.
whatever. And then, not to say that you're not making the right hires there, because I think more often than not we actually were, but in times where speed may not be the focus, like what else do you celebrate? And it's really making sure that you have the right people in the right seats. And sometimes these can be in opposition. And I think that's the interesting thing about where I sit now, is we try to hold both of these in really, really high regard, which is fun, but can be a challenge. And it really requires you to constantly have that conversation with yourself of like, is this the right person? Have I asked the right questions? Have I been totally honest in this? Because I want this person to work out. Like, I think recruiting is like sales, but it's like really honest sales if it's done right, Like, I'm not trying to sell you a product that doesn't
Yeah.
exist. I think the greatest compliment somebody can give me when they come in and I check in with them after 90 days is saying, yeah, this is exactly what I expected from the
Wow.
recruitment process. And I think that should always be the goal.
So how do you then balance that, right? The quality, quantity, speed, right? Also build, I know you're doing phenomenal, right? Like there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of momentum that you're experiencing. How does that translate?
Well, you don't always perfectly succeed at both. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the magic?
I'd be lying to you if I said I did.
Yeah.
I think on one hand, it's being really clear on how you articulate your culture. Like one of the things that I always try to do, and one of the things that I did when I came in is I tried to really quickly identify like who are the top performers here. And it's a company of very high performers. But who are those people where it seems like it is so effortless for them to exist in this dynamic and it doesn't feel hard for them and they just they're really genuinely connected and they're genuinely excited to be here every day and like what do they have in common and can we nail that down and like can we recruit for that? One of the things that we have a lot of collateral. Like we send you a lot about who we are at the beginning of the process, a lot about how we think about growth, how we think about comp, how we think about the impact that you can have here. And like that should get you excited and most of the time it gets people excited. But it's so much worse to mishire than it is to go, stretch a little bit, being a little bit understaffed. And I think to my earlier point, it is remarkable what you can do with a limited number of people if they're all the right people.
So true. So true. Hey, so would you always maintain that philosophy of the smaller the better?
Me personally, I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a Substack that I love by Ravi Gupta, and it's on being simultaneously demanding and supportive. Let me mute this. I think that is how I try to run my teams. And that is like how I stay lean is like it's also like one thing that I think about a lot. And one thing that like I've learned as a manager and probably struggled with as a manager, to be totally honest, is I push myself pretty hard and I've been pushed pretty hard in my career and it's always been good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I said earlier, there's always something I've learned about myself and always some way that I've grown on the other side of that. But we all as like nice, empathetic people can have this feeling of like, oh my God, I don't want to burn somebody. I don't want to
Yeah.
like push this person over the edge. I don't want them to hate me. I don't want them to like have to answer this Slack at 10 p.m. And again, like, we could get into a whole work-life balance conversation here, which we do not need to, but I didn't have that standard for myself. And I'm sitting here saying like, I actually liked what I learned about myself on the other side of being pushed a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
And most people are okay being pushed as long as it's also balanced with you being a human
Yeah.
on the other side of that. And also being like, I know I'm pushing you like crazy here. Here's what I hope you're learning. Let me know if it's not that. And like, what do you need? What do you need to keep pushing? Because let's figure this out together. He has a line in there where it's basically like the best coaches, the best parents that he's known are able to balance those two dynamics really, really well. And that is something that I certainly am not perfect at, but that is kind of how I strive to operate a lean team so that it can stay a lean team because there is a lot of demand on a lean team. Like we don't have a boring moment in our day.
Yeah. So do you set that expectations up front though? Like do you set, okay.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm pretty what you see is what you get. And so I basically tell people like, I'm going to give you more until you tell me no. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have to tell me no. I'm not going to self regulate for you. I'm also assuming that it's within reason, going to understand. I think it's also, I've mostly worked for founders and, or, co-founders or somebody who was really early in the
Yeah.
business who just
Yeah.
had that self-drive and they had to push that hard to get something off the ground. And so inherently that is the way that I have been managed is, cool. I stood this business up. And so, I'm also going to have high expectations for you. And I think the worst thing in the world, the thing that would be the least motivating for me in the entire world is somebody who didn't have high expectations for me. I think that's actually the worst thing a manager can do.
Yeah.
But
Funny
yes,
you say so. I just experienced the same with my SDR, Emmanuel, who was always following up on my to-dos in HubSpot, etc. And it was a pretty repetitive, like not the most exciting job,
Mhm.
but I always felt that the leap, and he's now our head of partnership, but I always felt that the leap was a really big leap, and I wasn't sure if he could, handle both tasks and everything until our head of marketing last year, had to take a month absence because of some personal issues, and we had no one else. He jumped in the gap. And he did phenomenal. He was working late at night, figuring everything out. His energy was up, like things were falling left and right through the crack, but he was open to feedback. And I realized like I've been holding him back by just not
Mhm.
pushing him and seeing when it
Yeah.
would crack, and that was my mistake as his manager. He's now our head of partnerships, does his task, and he's thriving.
Yeah. And doesn't that feel like awesome on both sides? Like I think there is, and there are exceptions, like when we look for an engineer, they have to be able to code at a certain level. So you
Yeah.
can't just like wheel your way into every
Yeah.
single job. I'm luckily on the side of the house that you didn't go to college for and you don't pass a technical exam for, or would be here. But there is something. And, I think I did a year of consulting between, and I worked with a lot of very young companies, a lot of like seed stage companies who didn't have the flashy name, didn't have the brand recognition to be able to potentially get people with like the quote unquote pedigrees that they wanted for some of these roles. And I remember talking to a CEO and I was like, there's this whole will versus skill
Yeah.
argument. And so maybe we actually need to pivot what we're looking for. We're not going to get the perfect resume here. Like, we're not at a comp level to get the perfect resume. You're not at a stability level from a business
Yeah.
perspective to get the perfect resume. So let's look for somebody who like wants to run through a wall. You know what I mean? And to your point, I love it. That's like the best feeling in the world when somebody just is so much better even than your high expectations and honestly like prayers and hopes at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I completely agree with you. I think people generally rise to the occasion. I don't know if that's like super Pollyanna or if I just have a decently positive outlook on the workspace and am not super jaded, but I think
I'm
people
so
generally
happy. I am so happy
rise
to hear
for the
you say
better.
that. I fully agree because I've seen it time and time again. And sometimes, yeah, people don't rise up
Sure.
to the occasion, but then that's the lesson, that's the learning, right?
Yeah.
Um, hey, give our viewers a little bit of context with your work at Build and titles. What is
Yep.
Build? Build Brew.
So at Bilt, I've only been here, gosh, about 7 months at this
Yeah,
point. It feels like 7 years in
yeah,
all of the good ways, but I oversee the people department here at Bilt, which is talent and people, culture, facilities. Built an incredible company.
awesome. Hey, and give me in terms of how big is the team?
My team, the people team,
Yeah,
on the HR side is 3 people, and
yeah,
on the recruiting side is 2 people. So
yeah,
similar headcount demands from
yeah.
working at the time. The team is incredible. Built right now is about 180 people. So an incredibly lean team across the board. We're not the only lean team. It operates like 10 different startups in one. So each product line is its own pod, which is a really cool structure and cool dynamic. And everybody, to my earlier points, and I think what keeps me so excited here is because we operate that way, because we operate with this disciplined thinness or leanness, everyone actively gets to hold a part of the product and they know what they're working on and how that plugs into the greater business. And like, you can have great managers, you can have a great product, you can have very cushy employee benefits and perks. But if people don't actually feel that connection and they don't feel like they're working on something important, it will never work. So that is where I'm so passionate about what we're doing. I know what people work on. You can point to somebody in this company and I can probably tell you what they own here.
And coming from Wunderkind, the learners that you had there,
Yep.
lean team, but also, the rapids,
Sure.
all
And
the
I did.
things
I
you
had
had
a
to do.
huge team at one point at Wunderkind, and it was a blast. So
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
that I've never had a huge team.
yeah,
I
yeah,
loved them
yeah,
dearly. They were also wildly successful. I think
yeah.
there's a certain amount of pride in being able to do something when you're like running all the way up the mountain. But not to say I don't love a large team every now and then too.
And maybe the founders of Build are also listening, it's like certain point, if the growth
I'm
keeps
just gonna
coming.
hire like
Yeah.
12 recruiters. It's gonna be very chill.
Oh, great. Yeah. So what were some of the lessons when you set 7 months ago, you set foot for the first time at Bill in terms of your approach on the recruitment process and the hiring that was happening at Build?
I always knew this to be true, but it was so even more true here. Like, I had somebody tell me the other day that they chose us over Meta because of the care we took and the time we took to explain the process to them and how we were going to hold their hand through it. They said that human touch is why they joined. We probably did spend an hour or two on the phone trying to work this out. And that stuff matters. I think,
Mm,
it is so easy to get caught up in like trying to hire really, really fast and like trying to find stuff that works for the masses. And like it works for a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I came in and I like cleaned up a few bumps in the process and you get a little boost from that. But like, you know, right now I am doing several offer calls myself. And, I will get on the phone with anybody and I will talk through their own personal aspirations and how that works here or doesn't. I think it's just been a constant reminder of how every person is different. Every offer process is different. Everyone cares about something slightly different, but it does need
yeah.
to fit in the overall built culture. And you just can't get complacent. And I think that is something special and something that has repeatedly like hit me in the face here that like you need to keep the gas all the way on and you really need to take the time to invest both for your sake and the company's sake, but also for the candidate's sake to really get to know somebody and dig all the way in and like have all these conversations up front so that when you bring somebody in, you're really confident about them and they are really excited about Bill.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that your biggest learning up? Because I remember you telling me you temporarily had to step back into more of hands-on recruitment
Yep.
recently. Yeah. How's it to be back
My
in that
fantastic
role?
recruiter and a lovely baby who
Yeah.
is adorable.
Yeah.
And she, bless her, she did an incredible job setting us up for success when
Yeah.
she went out. And she's an incredible recruiter. Like, hands down, she's amazing. And so I was a little nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like been a minute since I've
Yeah.
been all the way back in, like in the nitty gritty. And it's so fascinating to be pulled all the way back in. And, I've kind of like tinkered with how are we wording this in our, offer call? How are we doing this? Is this a call? Is this a Zoom? Is this whatever? And it's been fun to go back in the weeds. And I sit here, I felt a little bit like a hypocrite because I spend most of my day telling managers to like get back in the weeds. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I hadn't done it myself. And so I think it's just somebody told me once, like, stay close to the work, not the person. Don't micromanage anybody, but stay really close to the work and what's working in the work.
Mhm.
And, my recruiter had built a machine that really, really worked. So now I just get to go in and like tinker with a couple screws here and there. But it's been really cool to go all the way back in and hear what's working and like hear what messaging has kind of gotten stale because that's the other thing too is like all this stuff needs to constantly be updated and
Yeah.
especially with
Yeah.
a job
Yeah.
market going up and down people care about different things, you know what I mean? Like go back to you can't get complacent. The messaging that was working, you know last February when the job market was way down and we're starting to see it pick back up again, it's going to be different messaging
Yeah.
right now, you
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like right now you have when the job market is high people don't care that we're constantly messaging, that like we are a startup without any of the startup angst. You know what I mean? We don't have to worry about, runway, stuff like that. And, people want to hear more about growth and exciting and future facing now. And so what matters just changes so quickly. And so just staying really close to it has been a fun thing. And I think the lesson is to just always check back in.
Yeah.
Always just be trying something a little bit different. You never know what's going to hit. And usually it's a small thing.
Other senior leaders in talent, right? Listening to this podcast or anyone for that matter. What advice would you give our audience for building high impact, lean recruitment teams that can deliver under pressure?
I would tell them as much as they can, like, do one day, like, kind of trying to throw everything out the window. You know what I mean? Like, how would you actually convince somebody to do something without all of, like, the standard tricks and tools that you know? You know what I mean? You actually convince people to do things all day, every day, but, like, kinda throw the rule book out the window, and I think my bigger advice, and I think I've been saying it sort of this whole podcast, is like, don't underestimate what people are capable of, particularly if you have high standards for yourself. And I think that is a great lesson, not only for you, but for everyone that you're working with and for their future careers as well.
Wow, such great advice. Alli, where can people connect with you if they want to, if they're listening to this podcast?
Right.
LinkedIn?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you're a really great engineer, if you're really a product-minded person, if you're excited about Bilt and you want to come work at Bilt, you should definitely chat with me. We are always hiring really smart, hardworking, fun people. So yes, definitely come find me on LinkedIn.
In New York, right?
In New York,
correct?
yes, we are in office.
Yes.
We are in New York. We do love being in person together here. So yes, as much as I would love to talk to you in Nevada, less relevant right now.
Who knows in the future? But
Who knows? Unless you want to move.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. New York's a great city. It's a little
New York.
cold right now, but it is a great city.
It's literally 8 degrees.
Yeah. Alli, this is so lovely. I'm so glad we could find the time. Thank you for your wisdom. You inspired me. People can do so much more than what you think that they're capable of. Good luck with everything. And I hope to see you very, very soon.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.